What's going on? This is Marcus. In today's video, I'm going to talk about the time that I lost my job and I didn't even have an emergency fund in place and the steps that I took to kind of get through that rough patch. So, if you're interested in following my debt-free journey, I invite you to subscribe to the channel and definitely hit that like button because it'll help the channel grow. A lot of people always ask about this shirt. Definitely check out this brand, Millionaire. I mean, to me, the name speaks for itself. I think to be a millionaire, you got to be a millionaire first and be real about your situation, how you could change it, what you can do to improve it. So I'll definitely put a link in the description box to his IG and his website as well if you all are interested in checking out his merch and supporting the brother. I started at this job. I was the youngest attorney. I was the only minority attorney there. And so, hey, I'm at this job, I start there, and after about 6 to 8 months, I end up getting promoted to the number 2 within this agency. So I'm really excited, like, oh man, I got, promoted. And it's weird because if you've never been in this situation, anytime you work somewhere, not anytime, but most times, if you're the newest person or the youngest person and you get promoted over someone else, it's probably going to be problematic. Well, it wasn't going to be problematic for me, but people aren't going to be as willing to, potentially show you the ropes or the guidance. I really wasn't worried too much about it, but that's just a caveat and a little bit of food for thought. It ain't no love lost in corporate America. And so, I got promoted to the agency number 2. I did that job for about a year. And then after that year, I ultimately was promoted to being in charge of this entire division. And so during this time, it was multiple promotions. When I initially started, the agency had one person who was in leadership. They subsequently left. A new leadership was put in place. When that new leadership was put in place, this was when I started to see that ascension and the constant promotion. They even paid like 20-something stacks to send me to an executive level leadership course at a big-time university. So it was really a great experience, learning experience, and an opportunity to, lead a good group of people. For the most part, with a good group of people, because everything is never always a bunch of good group of people. That's just kind of how my transition went from the time I started to the time I got promoted. So I really had good relationships within the agency. At one point, I won an award for being the executive leader of the year. So things were really going great. My employment was at will. Some of you who may not know what at will is, it means that you can be terminated for any reason whatsoever or for no reason. So when you have at will employment, most jobs that attorneys have are at will positions. So that wasn't anything that was new to me. Every job I ever had was at will. And so everything was going along smooth. Now, fast forward, because I said, I was in a leadership position with, for the most part, a group of good individuals. But like I said, there was always some salty people. I don't know, this is a weird thing, but some of the people who were there longer, who I ended up, jumping for the promotion, I already knew what kind of individuals they were. I look like this, but I'm not stupid. And so a lot of times, it was interesting because I knew that those certain persons who were there before me didn't have my best interest at heart. And that comes with the territory when you're in a leadership position. I wasn't really tripping off that. No one was going to say anything out of pocket or disrespectful, so I really didn't worry too much about that. But I will tell you the thing that kind of was interesting. Well, it wouldn't be uncommon for individuals to start a rumor, make an anonymous call to get some type of inquiry and or investigation done, where you have to kind of just go through the process and wait until they investigated or the complaint was investigated and nothing was there. So that wasn't uncommon. I already knew what I was working with, so I made sure, when I work, I make sure I walk the straight and narrow when I work, because I ain't gonna let anything mess up the paper. That's just kind of how my mindset is. Now, where the termination came in place was interesting. So while doing my job, I essentially identified something that needed to be corrected. So I took the due diligence to actually raise this up the ladder, and unfortunately that wasn't well received. So, that's just how I am. If I see something that's wrong and you're dedicated about process, if I see something that's wrong and the company I work for is all focused on process improvement and being efficient, it's my job to make sure that I raise that flag and let the proper persons know. But the proper persons really, I guess they didn't want anybody to know. They didn't want anybody outside of this company I work for to know. So it kind of got swept under the rug. It was really a major thing. I brought it up. It was frowned upon that it was brought up. And one day after being there for 6 years and getting promoted so many times and bonuses and awards and the whole nine, I just showed up for work and I had a pink slip. I already knew it was coming, and it was interesting because I actually would tell the wife, like, man, I wish they just go ahead and do what they gonna do so we can get it over with, so I can just stop showing up every day. But during this time, I did not have an emergency fund in place. I didn't have a 3 to 6 months or anything. I was still in debt with credit cards and car debt. So again, I wasn't living paycheck to paycheck, but I didn't have enough to get me past 6, maybe 8 weeks if I stretched out that money and cut back some expenses. I remember I came home around noon and it was elated. It was like a thing of stress was just taken off my shoulder. And so with the termination, just briefly, let me just talk a little bit about contractual aspects of employment. Typically, when people sign up for employment, they'll sign an employment contract. Well, let me back up. First, when you have a contract, in order for there to be a valid contract, there has to be 3 things. It has to be an offer, it has to be an acceptance of the offer, and then the third thing is consideration. Essentially what consideration is a legal term when both parties give up something. Now, the example would be, okay, I hire you to paint my house. I offer, hey, if you come paint my house, I pay you $500. You accept. The consideration that I lose, the thing that I lose is the $500. I'm giving you $500. The thing that you're going to lose or perform is the actual painting. So consideration is either something you lose or something you have to perform. And let me give another example so you can know, you can see that's what consideration is. This is what consideration isn't. There's actually a case out there. I can't recall the case name offhand because it's been years since I read it. A grandfather made a contract with the grandson at the age of like 16 that if he didn't smoke, the grandfather would give him like $10,000 or something. And so the grandson on his 18th birthday, he was like, hey, I'm trying to cash in. And grandpa was like, nah, grandson, I love you, but I don't got 10 stacks for you. Grandson takes the grandfather to court to actually sue the grandfather. And in that case, the court found that there was no valid contract. There was an offer by the grandfather. There was an acceptance of the offer by the grandson. There was a consideration on the grandfather's part. The grandfather was going to lose something, which would have been the $500. And the performance that the grandson argued was he was going to stop smoking or not smoke. Well, the court found that because he was 16, he wasn't old enough to smoke. He didn't actually lose or perform anything because he never had a legal right to smoke, so he didn't have any type of performance that he actually had to do, so it was no consideration. Contract was null and void. Grandpa won. Thanksgiving was probably a mess after that. So now that we have that just kind of contract breakdown out of the way, how it typically works with employment contracts, normally when people sign employment contracts, they actually put a lot of terms within the contract. It could be a morality clause. It could be a clause that says, hey, if you're terminated or if you leave, you have a non-competition clause that lasts for 18 months or 24 months. The problem with putting a lot of those clauses in the beginning is that some courts have found that there's insufficient consideration to make a valid contract. So what an employer would do if an employer was smart was say, hey, I terminate you. Once I terminate you, I would send you a contract and say, hey, I'm terminating you, but I'm going to offer you a severance package and pay you for 8 weeks. In exchange for me paying you for this 8 weeks, you have to agree to these terms. You give up your rights to compete. you give up your rights to file any claims, and you also included in this is a non-disclosure agreement, so you can't talk about the processes and the things of that nature that are associated with our company. Now, non-disclosure agreement doesn't mean you can't point out wrongdoing. It really talks about the processes and operations of a company, not about wrongdoing. If you know the company is in there committing fraud and you sign an NDA, you can't be like, oh, nope, I guess I'm not going to tell them about the fraud. No, it only applies to legal processes and things that the company perform. It bars you from actually telling it. And so, back to the story. I get terminated. They offer me severance, which is common. And in this severance, they have all of these conditions and terms where you waive your rights to file any wrongful employment claims or anything to that effect. And so I guess most people sign this contract because, a lot of people need the money. Now here I am with about 6 weeks of money in the bank, no job in hand, nothing lined up down the road. Nothing lined up down the road. They offered me the severance, and I actually could use the 8 weeks of pay, but I knew that I potentially had some legal cause of action, so I elected not to sign it. I was like, nah, don't worry about it, I'm good. And they was hot, but because they thought I was just gonna sign it. But nah, I go out here and come up with a way to make some. I mean, I'm an attorney. I could just hang a shingle up outside of my house door and start taking clients. So I didn't think it'll be a problem in the temporary to have some type of income coming in. So of course I turned down the severance agreement because I felt that there was some wrongful termination with regard to that employment at this company. Now, the other thing that you all need to know, just from a legal standpoint, when you're an at-will employee, it means you can be fired at any time. But just because you're an at-will employee, it doesn't mean that you can be fired on the basis of some type of discrimination or for complaining and then you're a whistleblower. So just because a person is at will and you can fire them whatever you want, or an employer can terminate them whenever, it doesn't bar the employer from any type of employment cause of action. That's the other thing that you need to know. So here I am. I come home. I feel a little elated because I saw this coming down the pike. I remember I went in and told the wifey, and I just told her, I was like, hey, we're going to be all right. I always provide. I figure something out, even if I got to drive Uber or Lyft. Hey, I did that before. I worked at call centers before as a practicing attorney, like I talked about in other videos. But that was really kind of the situation. I even pulled the kids in, and it was funny because, they understood what happened, but they had no clue what happened. They still asking me for shit. Pardon my language. They still asking me for stuff. It was really interesting to see kind of how kids react to, sitting down and explaining, hey, we may have to cut back on some things and so forth. And so that was the situation. I thought I had all of this stability in this company. I ended up not having no stability in this company, and I didn't even have an emergency fund. And so the next question is, well, man, what did you do? How do you get through that? And these are really the 5 steps or the 5 things that I did to get through that moment. The first thing is, hey, you got to accept it, reflect on it, but don't let it bother you. I had never been terminated from anything ever in life. And so I know a lot of times when people get terminated from their job, it's an attack to their ego because, people strive themselves on being productive employees, good employees, and things like that. But you can't take it personal. Jobs come and go. That's just kind of how things work unless you're your own boss and you have your own business, your own entity. So accept it. You only can change the things that you can change, and don't worry about the things you can't. You can't go back in time and fix it, so just kind of brush it off and move on, even though I know it's hard. Number 2, and this is a big one, get what is yours. A lot of people, we talk about entitlement programs, and it's funny because entitlement programs like Social Security and unemployment, and you hear all these politicians say, we need to cut entitlement programs. And now there's 2 types of people when it comes to these programs. There are people who actually deserve those benefits, and then there are people who try to abuse the system. But a lot of times you hear politicians on TV saying we need to cut entitlement programs, and entitlement programs aren't a bad thing. The reason they're called entitlement programs because you actually paid into Social Security or unemployment during all your years as a law-abiding working citizen. So you are entitled to that benefit because you actually paid to have that benefit in the event that you need it. Get the unemployment benefits. You worked all those years, paid those taxes. Isn't that people like you in that position who are taking advantage of the program? So don't feel ashamed to get money that you've been paying into for years because it's yours and that's what it's there for. Okay, the next thing is you have to cut your expenses. I was even trying to sell the motorcycle, but it was just a bad time of the year to actually try and sell a motorcycle. You have to find alternative employment, even if it's temporary. Do not be too proud to do something that will allow you to provide for your family, as long as you're not out there trapping. I'm not condoning trapping. I'm not condoning anything crazy, human trafficking, bank robbery, set it off. Nah, none of that. But go out there and get a job. If you can do Uber, if you can do Lyft, if you can get a job at UPS working part-time during the night shift and doing something else during the day. You have to find a way to supplement your income just to have something coming in so that any money that you may have, if you have an emergency fund, isn't getting stretched too thin. This is where I found out and realized that even though I had a lot of debt, I didn't do bad in actually over-leveraging myself. And this is what I mean by that. I lost a job. I was essentially out of work for about 3 weeks. After that 3 weeks, I was actually able to find a job. A lot of times, if you're an attorney, you can do a contract work with a private law firm where you just work on isolated cases. Now, these types of jobs are literally no benefits, no nothing. I was making 40% of what I was making prior to getting fired, but that 40% was enough to pay the essentials, what I needed to pay until I could find something more in line with my experience and skill set. So you have to be willing to get out there and work. I mean, and at the end of the day, hey, protect and provide is the name of the game. Hey, fellas, protect and provide is the name of the game. I do whatever it takes. If I gotta sell pizzas, if I gotta make pizzas, cut down trees, my family not gonna go without the essentials. I mean, it is what it is. Zombie apocalypse coming. I'm gonna strap up, think I'm in Iraq, and I'm gonna do what I need to do. But my family gonna eat. We gonna be all right. So that's really what it's about. You know, providing and protection. So I had to do whatever was necessary. And the last thing that you have to do, which is equally important, is continue to search for employment that's comparable or better than the job you were terminated from. Now, I know that can be taxing and it's depressing as hell. I'm going to just tell you, it's depressing. You're applying for jobs, you're going for interviews, people like, no, you've been referred but not selected. I mean, it gets depressing, but it's consistent. Applying for a job, that process in and of itself is an actual job. But you have to continue to put that effort in to actually find suitable employment. So, essentially, I was out of work for about 2 months. I found this part-time employment, and I used that part-time employment to cover the essential expenses for about 4 months before I found a job that was comparable to the job that I lost and the income that was comparable to that job. So, I mean, that's really the game plan. Going through a job loss is something that's traumatic, but it's something that you can get through if you have a plan. I literally had 6 weeks worth of salary, and I was blessed to be able to work, so there's ways that you can make it work. So, hey, that's kind of the video. I appreciate you all tuning in. If you're going through job loss or unemployed or underemployed, just know that it's temporary. Definitely keep your hustle up. I got faith in y'all. Y'all take care. Be blessed. Peace.